How many of you in here like to focus on relationships in your life? Of course, right? It's kind of our main focus.
And how many of you believe in miracles?
Woo!
Figure about right. Okay, good. That's the kind of group we want. Because the doubters don't get it. It takes a while to get them to see that we're actually able to accomplish with people. Because we literally create miracles in people's lives. It is phenomenal what we've been able to figure out and achieve because of some of the stuff that we went through. And so we're going to tell you a little bit about what we went through, because the miracles we're going to share today are going to be hard to believe if you don't get this picture behind it all and what kind of got us here to learning and figuring this thing out.
And first off, if some of you guys could just kind of shout out, what are some of the reasonings or what brought you to this conference?
Yeah. A person, a relationship.
A person.
Perfect.
What are some other things that maybe you guys are searching for in your life? Answers.
Direction. Like, I'm thinking I want to be a facilitator.
Direction. Great.
I heard something else somewhere. Go ahead.
I just want to learn all about energy and healing your body, healing itself.
Healing.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah. What else? Curious.
Self-healing.
Self-healing. Yes. Notice yourself. Doing it yourself is one of the keys of all keys. If you're out there to find someone else who is going to do it for you, you're only going to get so far. You're going to get to what we call phase 2. But you're not going to get to phase 3 if it's somebody else doing it for you. It's about you mastering doing it yourself. That's going to change everything. Like completely change everything in your life. No one else is going to figure you out. You're the only one who can tap in and figure you out.
How many of you in here have children by raise of hand? Awesome.
Ooh, how many of you are a child? To a parent, right?
One of our big focuses is parenting, especially having my father, working together. We've noticed that the parents, they always come to us and they're like, my child is suffering with this and I'm trying to help them with this and I'm not sure how to do it. And a lot of times they're coming to us to help someone else in their life. And it's so fun for us to be able to show them that it's not so much about the child and their issues, but it has a lot to do with the dynamic of the relationships.
Yes, and we, just to start out, just to be really nice to everybody that's a parent, you screwed up your kids. You don't know how you screwed them up, and that's the problem, is you don't know how you did it. Because if you figure out how you did it, what is that going to help you to be able to do? Undo it. Exactly. And luckily, it's within you. It's something that's inside of you, that's part of yourself that's going on. And there's a foundational principle here that I want to put out there that is just a huge key. Because somebody talked about learning about energy, right? So I was not a woo-woo kind of person before I started all this. Now, I'm incredibly far out there woo-woo. And I had to be convinced of it through a series of experiences. I had to see some things. I had to have it explained a certain way that my brain thinks, right? And one of the concepts, so one of the things that happens in this model is that it helps bring two really different types of personalities together. How many in here are more emotional and feeling kind of people? All right, are empaths. And how many of are more logical, scientific? Great. Why are you guys having such a hard time getting along with each other? Because there's a concept here that we have figured out to help people understand. We use neuroscience, the learning of neuroscience, to help people change the way they're using their own brain. When you were born, how many of you got a manual about your brain? Oh, no, nobody did. I know.
Which is really interesting for us because us coming from me coming from him and him being the logical kind of personality, it's been so interesting learning more about the brain logically that we've come to understand how important the emotional side is. And us coming from that side, we become way more emotional. Like in my family, we didn't really say like, I love you very much because it was just like illogical, you know? And now we've changed and we're always saying, you know, things like that and like talking about our emotions and seeing that side of things has helped us so much. And so being able to have that balance of the logic and the emotion has really made a difference.
Yeah. So in a way, I'm a convert. I'm a convert to emotions and being, you know, I grew up on a small farm. A farming area where I did lots of hard work, baling hay, doing just hard things. And my teaching growing up and my maps of thinking where you just work your way, you just pound your way through things. You just muscle your way through stuff when it's hard. And man, I had some things come up that were really hard and muscling through didn't work.
And that seems to be kind of the Western mentality, right? Push through it, discipline yourself, make it happen. But how fun does that sound? It's not fun to have to be beating yourself against this thing that is really hard.
And so in this model, we have these ways to help our brains to understand the function of the brain to the level at which it changes our brain. Like it naturally changes. You don't need to discipline and work hard and go out and do hard things necessarily. It's a matter of understanding your brain so that you understand the process of its change. And part of the way we do that is we teach you about the system of the brain in a way that your brain can capture. We're not going to go deep into all these real, you don't have to, it's not a textbook thing where you have to be writing all these details down. It's just these ones that apply to your specific situation and your specific struggle that you might be having.
Because have you ever had a time where you worked through something, got through something, and it was this amazing experience, but you weren't exactly sure how the process worked to get to that point? Like you're like, wow, like I really understood the feeling of this and all the benefits I've gotten from it, but I'm not really sure the process. And so if you're able to kind of break down the process of how that works, then you'll be able to do it over and over and over again in your life. And a lot of times when we learn things, we don't know how to apply in all areas of our life, right? We got through this one thing that we healed from and it's amazing and we're a new person, but new things are going to come up, right? Life goes on. And so being able to have a process that you can always turn to is super helpful and makes it so that you can always stay in that place of healing.
So the thing that drew me to this was pain. Everybody love the pains in their lives? Love them? Aren't they great? Amazing pains, right? It's that fear of the pain that holds us back so much. And I used to be I just try to be positive through everything. You just got to focus on the positive and be positive. Anybody been taught that before? Be positive? There's nothing wrong with it. It's okay. You can raise your hand if you. However, it doesn't tend to directly solve problems or fix things, the core of it.
And especially in his personal situation, he was using the positive to kind of mask the reality of what was going on in his life. So he was like, oh no, like my life's awesome. Like I have all these great things. And even like talking to other people and his experience and things like that, he didn't really see the reality of his situation, what was going on, because he was so positive in that way.
Yeah. And it's interesting. We have somebody here today I worked with for quite a few years that knew me. But I bet she had no idea the stuff that was going on at home with my life and things going, because I was just positive person. Just be positive. That'll do it. And yet there was a whole bunch going on, and there was a huge struggle going on both with me and my wife, and a lot of different struggles and mental illnesses and addiction and different things that were just really just creating this tumultuous life where we were just out of control. And we were raising kids. We had 6 kids. She's number 3. And
it really, really interesting from my perspective in all of this, because, it wasn't about till I was 19, 20 when we were introduced to these new concepts and these new ideas. But looking back on my life and seeing kind of like my childhood and what I was grown up in, like noticing the things that like weren't normal. Like we learned how to like make our own pancakes and our own breakfast at like age 6 and 7 and 8, because my mom wasn't there or she wasn't around. And then now I look back and I'm like, whoa, like that's not normal, But when you're grown up in that environment, that's how you view the world. And you don't really know any different until someone presents or you figure it out through your life experiences.
And we're going to come back to that in a minute, this viewing the world piece. That's really, really valuable. We did a little handout. Everybody got the handout, right? Anybody not get the handout? Okay, we're going to get the handout around to everybody. So maybe keep your hand up for a minute as he comes around so he knows who you are. But over the years that we were going through this and struggling, we tried a lot of different things. We tried everything from all the natural and holistic things until we depleted everything we could find there. And then we we kind of gave in to the mainstream society and what their methods were. And because we ran out. It's like, what else do you do? What do you do next? If you just are out and the pain is so high that you have to do something, right? And so we started in that arena and started to learn about how they do things and their perceptions and attempts to try to do things. But everything we tried, most of it would have a temporary effect. And sometimes temporary was a good 3 or 4 months, right? Pretty good. It felt like something was going on, something happened.
And how many of you guys have experienced something like that in your life, where you've tried this thing and it starts to feel great and you feel awesome, and then slowly over time it may go a little bit backwards or may go back to where you were, or even sometimes worse. And then you have to try something else, right? It's kind of like this cycle or this process that keeps happening over and over.
Anybody feel that? Anybody experience anything like that? I'm really curious. Yeah, it's really common. And this is part of why. As I started to learn some principles and ideas and concepts, somebody introduced to me something about the brain. Where did our brain go? Oh, it's in my...
Yeah,
I lost my brain. I started to learn these concepts about neuroplasticity. How many of you ever heard the term neuroplasticity? Yes.
Awesome.
That's almost half. That is so exciting to me because 5 years ago it was not a well-known. How many of you learned that word within the last 5 years? Curious. About half of those. Great. So neuroplasticity, this ability to disconnect the wiring, or our way of thinking, or our way of reasoning, the way that we use our brain and reconnect it another way, is called neuroplasticity. So someone introduced me to this and said, a mental health issue or an addiction, by the way, the neuroscientists see those as the same thing in the brain. So mental health issue like OCD, depression, anxiety, personality disorders, any kind of social disorders, eating disorders, all of those are mental addictions in the brain itself, the chemicals in the brain. There's a lot more other chemicals going on, but these ones all have a main piece of them that is our brain doing what it's doing. And so I started to look and search into this neuroscience. I started to really obsess and study a whole lot. Started to get into my own head and notice that I was changing from what I was learning, and it was changing me. And I started to, the habits and the things, the perpetual things going on in my head started to just kind of fade and not happen, the ones I didn't want. And they were being replaced by ones I really wanted. And I started to realize that this understanding of it is what changes us. And when I read from the neuroscientists, I noticed that they had a common theme. And that when they look at the world of psychology, their view of it is that the reason that the psychologists are not solving people's problems is because they're not finding the problem. And they're using all these labels and all these things to say, oh, you have OCD, you have,
BPD.
Yeah, borderline, that you have an eating disorder, you have, and there's, a myriad of all those things, right? And they think that's the problem, so that's what they're trying to solve. And the neuroscientists are saying, those are actually not the problem, those are symptoms. Those are symptoms to a deeper problem. And that fascinated me. That just rang true to me. That resonated. And so I started to learn deeper and study deeper about what all these neuroscientists, and I found out, has anybody heard of the BRAIN Initiative that the government started about 10 years ago? There's a few of you. Yeah, the BRAIN Initiative was the government's finally being aware of the rate of Alzheimer's increase. Has anybody been aware of that or seen any research around that? Yeah, it's an exponential curve. You know what that means? It's getting way worse. Exponentially, that means they can predict down the line when we are all going to have Alzheimer's. All of us, and dementia. Anybody on board for that? No, I hope not. And so the government started dumping money into brain research specifically. And they call it the Brain Initiative, and BRAIN stands for a whole bunch of, it's an acronym, you can look it up. And
so then
yeah.
a ton of information was coming out because all of this money was dumped into the researchers, right? The schools and the neuroscientists. And all of a sudden there was all this information out, but people weren't hearing about it still. Why were they not hearing about it? Because of that information, it takes 20 to 40 years for that to get into the schools, into the mainstream, into where everyone is hearing about it. And so when we started getting into it, specifically him during this time, he was just like blown away by all of this stuff. And he used part of those concepts and those ideas of neuroplasticity to quit his old job. And then he spent 12 to 16 hours. He's an incessant researcher. Even today, he spends about 2 to 3 hours every day researching new stuff. And he's always telling me about it. I'm like, it's too much, Dad. Like, I'm not like at that level. And so being able to understand and see all of this research, he was able to put it all together. And a lot of the times when we're talking about our model and those different concepts, people feel kind of like it's resonating with them. And it's because a lot of us know a lot of the stuff that we teach. But a lot of times we haven't put it all together into a way that's really clear and can really be used. And so that's what he created.
Yeah. And so this model that's really based off of neuroscience, but also intuition, and a lot of the stuff I put into the model, studies came out later that proved those things. Anybody experienced that before? And you're like, oh, that's why it's so fun for me to research, because I'm finding people proving the thing that I already put in play and saw results from and happen with people. But so as I did this, I started to really change and shift myself, like massively. And then my family, and then my neighbors, and then other extended family, and I was putting this model together. I was finding all these pieces to this model that would help people shift and change.
But the biggest thing that he learned from all of this research, was understanding changing himself and how that had an effect on everyone else around him. Because he was focusing on the other people in his life and his family, his friends and things like that, and seeing all the problems in them and like trying to figure out how to help them and fix them. But what it really came down to was he changed himself, and then that changed everyone else around him. So me being able to see that in him and the change that he had, because I was away for a while he was kind of coming up with this model and researching incessantly. And so I came back to my family and I was like, whoa, like this is really different. Like what's going on with my family? Like what? And so being able to see the change in him made it so I wanted to be on board and really diving in and learning about it.
So what is the best part of that? If you change you, other people change.
How many of you as parents try to control your children?
And get them to do what you want. Yeah. Points to the parent. That's great. It's what our society has taught us. Parents know best, so then they force their children into that same path, right? Makes sense. It's the safe path. It's the one we took, the one we're familiar with.
And so when you're trying to control everybody else around you and you're just trying to make them be a certain way, what if you could just control yourself, and then that would help other people change? Because you have complete control of yourself, right?
That's the best part, is that if you can influence other people by changing yourself, then you're in charge, right? And in relationships, I learned that whenever you have a relationship, there's 2 relationships. And whenever you converse with someone, there's 2 conversations. One is conscious and one is subconscious. The subconscious is way more complex and has way more data and way more information than the conscious one. And so we, as parents, we're like, well, what am I supposed to do with my child? And we meet with someone and that person says, well, do this, and then try this, and then say this, and if they say this, then say this.
And you're taking notes like a madman. You're like, okay, you do this, 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 and this, and when my child says this, I need to say this, and when they do this, I need to do that. It's like, how are you going to remember all that stuff, all those strategies and all those things that you're trying to help your children with?
And the other thing is that they're teaching you to put on an act. They're teaching you to be something you're not, and therefore deceive the child into submission, right? Get them to do it by you acting a certain way. And therefore, and then stuffing your own personal self deep inside and hiding it. Does everybody see a problem with that? Yeah, there's a big problem. I like those high hands. Yes. From the youngest person in the room, almost, besides the baby right behind him.
And when you're kind of in that stage of life as a parent, you're trying to be that example, right? You're trying to set the example for your child. And so you're trying to be this perfect person for them all the time and kind of stuffing away the stuff that's not so perfect. But what is that really doing? It's making it so that the child doesn't learn how being vulnerable and all those other valuable lessons can be taught from being open and really explaining what's going on in your brain. So a lot of times when we talk to parents, we say, look, when you talk to your kids, tell them how much you messed up in their parenting, in your parenting with them. Because they can see all the things that you're doing that's not really helping them be open or vulnerable with you, but a lot of times you can't see it. And that's what we love to teach people.
Because there's a lot going on in that second subconscious conversation that you're having. And teenagers, have you ever seen teenagers just completely just like you are a moron, like, right? Anybody feel, right? They just, and the reason is because you are a moron. Literally, you're trying to act something out and do something on the outside that's not you, and their subconscious looks right past it and sees the real you and goes, what are you doing? And I don't want that. I want the real you. Like when I was a little baby, you were the real you then, right? And they felt that and they experienced it. And so they know teenagers become incredibly capable of reading all your body language, all the stuff that's going on. And the other part that maybe people in this room get a little bit of, but even the neuroscientists now, they're saying it this way: your brain runs off of electricity. And electricity runs on frequencies, always. They're waves. And your brain does not have a metal skull that contains all those frequencies, right? So they're going out. And they used to think that our children, this is one of the big points right here. We used to think our children were taking on our patterns through our DNA, right? But there's a lot of new information about DNA and DNA expression. And actually, our children, as they're developing their brain, those first cells are connecting. They're getting the messages through our frequencies of the brains of not only the mother, but anyone else in the space. And that space can go out a long ways. And they're taking that in, and that's how their brain is deciding how to connect and create patterns. So we see these generational things, and we used to think it was being passed through the DNA. Now there is some that does get passed. Some of those things do get passed. But they're realizing more and more now that it's actually being passed down through those frequencies. Anybody have stress when you are a mother and carrying a baby? Just curious. Yeah.
Never had that.
Yeah, never had. Or been standing next to a mother carrying a baby and you were under stress? Okay, there we go. So they take on these patterns through these frequencies. And that's how and now that's what they got to work through. And you passed it on. And you passed it on, but you still kept it yourself. So now you both got it. And now you're raising these children, and they're figuring it out, and you're trying to figure it out, and everybody's trying to have these conversations, but they're looking right through you, and you're trying to hide what you are, your weaknesses, and your, I was this try to be just perfect example person of everything specifically, strictly, exactly, so that they would see how life is done. And behind the closed doors, I was miserable, having a hard time struggling with all these things. But I thought that you were supposed to be the example to them. But that's not the kind. I was being an example, a horrible one. I was showing them how to hide everything and try to act like the world wants you to act, right? We raise our children and we teach them to rely on us. And then when they get to teenagers, they break that. But what have we taught them? To rely on some external thing, some other being. So they turn to their friends. And then we think that something's wrong, but they're doing exactly what we taught them. Isn't that crazy? Man.
So obviously we've learned a little bit about the brain and parenting. So that's what we love to teach people. We love to teach how you can disconnect from an old childhood pattern that you've had in your life that maybe be anxiety or depression or OCD or any of those things, and reconnect in a new place where you don't have those things anymore, right? And we're talking about like really changing, like not having to cope or deal with these issues, right? A lot of people, they go into different...
That's called phase 2.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you
Phase
this.
2.
So this is what typically happens. These doctors, these neuroscientists, they say, okay, everybody's trying to solve the wrong problem. That's why they're not solving the problem. But what they come up with is phase 2. Phase 1, so phase 1 is suffering.
So that's all the pain, everything that you're experiencing that you feel like you need to change. Because pain is really a message to your body that something's off, right? Something needs to change here. And so when you feel that, I mean, and this can be intense pain that a lot of us can be going through, especially when it's mental.
It can be mental pain. I worked with a whole bunch of people that had attempted suicide or couldn't get suicide out of their head. That is a lot of pain. That's a lot of pain, right? And so we start off with the suffering, phase 1.
And because of so much suffering, then we start to search out a solution, right? And a lot of times we find peace in partly solving the solution. But we don't get all the way to fixing the problem. We stop at the part of just feeling good about it temporarily.
So we look for relief.
Yeah.
So we look for relief or release, right? So you get all these stressed cells in your body, you get all this intensity, you get pain, you get whatever's you're feeling. And so we search for relief from that. We want to get away from it.
How many of you have had an issue or problem and you go and you talk to your friend about it, right? You kind of throw up on them all of your issues and everything that's going on, and it feels great afterwards. A lot of the times you're like, oh, like they understand me, they get me, they validated me, but did it actually fix the problem? Exactly, it did not.
Yeah, so when you go to relief and you stop there, it sends you back. Eventually, you go back, right? Now think about all the things you've tried over time. Which one were they doing? Were they going to relief, right? So I believe in all the things that give you relief, by the way. They're all great. Better be careful with that. Some chemical things, maybe not so much. But relief techniques or release techniques, or going in, even massages, and we do a lot of the stuff, meditations, deep breathing, all those things. Those are getting to the level of relief. So first you get the phase 2 is feeling relief. But most stuff out there just gets you to phase 2. Anybody want to guess what phase 3 is?
Address the issue.
So when you actually address the real issue, there is an identification process in getting there. And phase 3 is literally thriving. It's thriving in that area of your life.
And even notice for a second how different the word thriving sounds compared to the word coping with or dealing with, right? It's okay. You don't want to just be okay with your mental illness. You want to be thriving in life and enjoying life and loving to get up every morning to experience it.
So when your brain gets to the thriving point, the one that we're talking about that we use in the model, then the source of the suffering is gone. So it doesn't come back. So you don't need to keep going to get relief. So when as I learned this stuff and started teaching it to other people, and I'm trying to remember, did I tell you about working in the office?
No.
Functional neurologist. Okay. Mm-mm. So I talked to a functional neurologist, alternative functional neurologist that did something that only one of 3 doctors had ever done. 3 doctors in Utah that did it. I explained it to him and he was really taking it. He's like, that sounds like that aligns with everything I know about neurology and the brain and everything. So let me send you some clients. He sent me somebody that had multiple suicide attempts, couldn't get out of that. Someone with borderline personality disorder. Anybody know that one? Yeah, usually the people who know that raise their hand really high. Because that one's intense. And then another one. And all 3 of them had, in one day, just a major shift. We do these intensive sessions, 7 hours. They had this major shift, completely changed their foundational way of using their brain and thinking. And so he said, why don't you let me clean out one of these rooms, make an office for you, and you can come to my clinic, work with people every day. And I was like, that's my dream come true. I got this model, I want to help people with it. right? And I want to hone it in as I go. So for 2 years, I got to work in this office and work with patients with every kind of mental illness out there. And after the first year, I had a group of them came to me that said, well, individually, they kept coming to me and saying, how did you do that? Like, how did you do that? I worked on that for 12 years. I went to therapy for da-da-da, and it did more than everything I've ever done. I had one guy that did the 3-step program 3 times, and then an independent one that was similar to that. So we've been through 4 of them and 7 years of therapy. And in one day, he was like, you did more than all that stuff put together. I had another one whose dad was a therapist, and he had been to therapy his whole life. He was 26 years old, suicidal, self-harm, multiple things. He went to this, he got so bad, he almost lost his life, almost took his life. They put him into a facility that taught him all these skills and everything. I met with him, I said, what do you think about that? And he goes, it was great. I really know what to do now. Like when this happens and this trigger and and I'll know what to do and I know how to cope with it and how to deal with these things. And then we went through the session, and at the end he was like, holy crap. He said, you just completely changed my life. Like I am holy cow. I said, what about all that stuff you learned? He goes, I don't even need it. It's like, it's all gone. I don't even need it. I just spent 2 months at a facility after trying to take my life, and I don't need any of that stuff. This totally, completely changed my brain.
And we have like, so many stories like that. And we actually even have a lot of clients in this room, and they have a tag that looks like this. So afterwards, if you want to kind of learn and talk to them about their experience, they're really open to talking about it. And you can kind of get a feel for what it is that we do a little bit better.
Yeah. And some of those, I said, they came to me and said, how did you do it? I put together a course, and I started teaching facilitators, we call them. So the facilitators now are helping other people, sometimes one-on-one. We have a whole digital program and a bunch of stuff. Do you guys who are facilitators want to stand up? If you're a facilitator or you're in the course right now? So these are all facilitators right here. And then is there others that are people who've gone through the course? We got one right here. Yeah, another one right here. So these are all people who will love to tell you their story. And they will blow your mind with their stories. Like literally, I wish I could just tell them all because they light me up for one. It's so exciting. But every kind of mental illness out there I have worked with. Like it is phenomenal how effective this is. Now everybody's complex. Everybody has different speeds at which it works and different things like that. I've given you some pretty miraculous stories. There's a lot of those. There's others that have taken a little bit longer. There's stories where, it helped them quite a bit, and then a little while later, we got together again, and then it just really jumped on and helped them. It had, there's this hump that you get over kind of, and then you start just gliding. And life's great. Do you feel like you're gliding, Julia?
Oh, heck yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to use Julia as an example because, first of all, she's amazing.
Is that okay if we share your story?
Yeah, you totally good.
Okay. Because she was someone who was stuck. Her brain had gotten into so many patterns of OCD. Her OCD would trigger seizures. So how long have you been married?
3 years.
She's been married 3 years. She's 24 years old. Her poor husband, who was a school teacher, was trying to help her, but it got so bad she couldn't really even get off the couch. And this is her mom next to her. You can raise your hand. She would go over to feed her and to help her. That's how severe. It was obtrusive to their lives. Like, of course, like it was everything now. She just couldn't function. And she started the program.
Because Lucy, she actually came to the Energy Healing Conference in the summer. So they've actually been to this, and this is where they saw us present, and that's what kind of drove her to investigate a little bit more.
Yeah. So, and now it's only how many months later now?
5.
Has it been 5 months?
Yeah.
Wow, time flies. 5 months. She couldn't even get off the couch. She was just there. Any of your kids can't get out of their room or off their chair or couch? Just curious. Nobody wants to raise their hand. There's a lot of them out there, let me tell you. and they think they lack motivation. They think all these things. But once they learn about their brain and they know what's going on, they change it. Because that day, she started the program and started into these principles. She wasn't even through the whole thing. She got up, she went out, she went to the movies, right? That with her in-laws, ones that I better not talk too much about them, and that she didn't always get along with. Had just an amazing experience, and she has been on fire since that day. She's helped a whole bunch of other families, probably I don't know how many people now have come into our program because she is just lit up. She's out there. One of her things, she couldn't step on rocks. She couldn't step on cracks. She couldn't go on hikes. She met a family up on a hike, and now their whole family is in the program. Adult kids, because she was on a hike doing the thing she loves to do but couldn't do, right? This is, like, I don't know how to put this any deeper than it is just miraculous. It is so amazing what we can achieve and accomplish with people very quickly and easily. Like, easily. I tell people it's going to be fun. Right? And they're like, I tried to take my life a few days ago, and I don't feel like it's going to be very fun. And then by the time we get through the session, I said, I told you it was going to be fun, didn't I? I'm like, you're right. It was totally amazing. This is so fun, right?
Which is totally different. I mean, when you talk to people who are going to therapy or different things like that, they're like, oh, like, I got to go again. Like, I need to do this, right? But this is like, we're excited, and it's fun to do it every day of your life. It's this process that you do with yourself. And so it's not this thing that you have to rely on other people or, I mean, anyone around you, but that you get to just go inside yourself and do the process. And we love it. I mean, we do it together. We go through these breakthroughs and walk through things together, and it's a blast.
Yeah, and here's the thing. You're already doing a bunch of processes. They just suck. They're hurting you, right? You have a thing you do every day when you wake up. And it's most likely, most of that is not helping your day, right? And then you get up through your day and you have thoughts, all these processes that you have been taught to have that don't help you throughout your day. And I'm going to say even the positive one, it can help you a little, but it doesn't get you to this. Positivity gets you here, you know? And you can go to your yoga class and enjoy all that and feel that feeling and then go back into your miserable life to have to go back again in a few days. I'm not saying I'm against yoga. I love it. Hot yoga especially. All those things I love, but it's a matter of solving the issue. Now, when you learn this model and you get to this thriving place, then you go do yoga and you're having a completely different experience because you're processing the experience of doing yoga in a different way that is really affecting you, really affecting your brain, right? When I go work out, I'm doing a workout in my head about what's going on and assuring that these things happen for us.
So how many of you today have felt something that has resonated with you? Raise your hand. That is awesome, because that's what kind of led us into all of this. We heard something about neuroplasticity and it really resonated within us, you know, tuning into our own guidance system to feel that, and that's what's brought us here today. And so we really want to give you the opportunity to take action on that feeling that you have. Because how many times do you go to a conference, you hear someone speak, and you're like really pumped about it, you're really excited, and then you go home and life gets in the way and you just slowly forget about that thing, right?
You get distracted.
Yeah.
Distraction is the #1 killer of success, right? And this model technically is actually a model of success in the brain, right? It's helping you become successful. That's what it does. Because being miserable means we have not been successful at the thing that we're trying to be and experience, not having fulfillment in life, right? So this is a method. So #1, distractions. Your brain is addicted to distractions. I know, I'd be diagnosed with ADHD right now. That is the #1 driver in ADHD, distraction. We constantly get dopamine hits by shifting our focus, and so it's incredibly distracting. So you don't tend to achieve a whole bunch of things because you don't stick with them. Anybody familiar with ADHD or know anyone? Yeah. I mean, kids nowadays. Talk to a school teacher. One of our facilitators is a school teacher, and she will tell you, wow. And she's been a school teacher for 20-something years. Something like that. And the kids have just changed. Like over time, they have massively changed and shifted. And we forgot all about. We were going to talk about technology and how that, but you know what? We'll have to do it later. What the technology is doing to our brain and the ways it's making it shift and change is huge. So we put together an event. We're just starting this new event, and we're really excited to have a lot of people come because we have these programs that you can go through that are just these incredible life-changing programs, and it's about a 2-month thing, 2.5 months, and that's kind of a big thing to get going. So we want to start you off with something, and our company's name is Fulfill Life Yourself. And if you look at this acronym, what does it say? Fly. Because one of these feelings that I get as I lift these patterns out from me is I feel light, almost like I can fly. And just real quick, even though we're almost out of time, when I was a kid, I'd have this dream I could fly. I had it so many times I can't count it, ever since I was about 4 or 5, that I could fly, and I could just do it by just doing something in my head. And it was something that was just letting go. I couldn't, it wasn't super clear to me, but it was in my head. And then when I turned about a teenager, other people started showing up in the dream, and I started showing them how to do it. I was like, this it's like, this is how you do it. You just let go, and you just know that everything's super okay, and you're safe, and you can fly. And we'd have these experiences where we'd go up and we'd fly. And if something distracted us, we weren't in danger. We would just slowly come down and lose the ability to fly. But it wasn't scary or anything. I had this dream so many times. And now I get to live it. This is what I get to do. I've helped hundreds of people with major, incredible difficulties. I mean, ones that the world is just not figuring out in the mainstream. And so helping you come and learn it. I guarantee you come and learn this, you will share it with other people. You can't not do it, right, guys? Everybody who stood up. Like, it becomes the center of your universe, this ability that you have to use your brain to take yourself to a whole new place in life. And all this suffering and all this stuff doesn't have to be there. And then you get to just live in this realm, phase 2 and 3. And that is a fun place to live because you're just thriving. You're finding new ways. You're being creative, right? So we've been creative, and we've come up with this event to have you guys come to.
And we're really excited because we love Tammy Ward. She's one of our clients, actually, and we love how she's put this whole energy conference together. So we really want everyone here to have the opportunity to come to it.
Yeah, and so we're doing, it's a 3-day or
3 hour
3 hour event. It's a 3-hour event, and it's Learn to Fly. It's our Learn to Fly event. And we're kind of kicking this off and getting it started. This is really affordable for this kind of thing, by the way. Our whole program is incredibly affordable compared to many that don't work very well or don't last. This is a new way to live. It literally is a new way to get up in the morning and to go throughout your entire day and use your brain differently. And it is so fun. Again, I wish I could have people telling their stories, but you saw them stand up and they all have tags like this. So when you see them, you can say, hey, what was your experience? What did you do? And these people will share some pretty deep things with you because they realize the value that it is to be open and vulnerable and share. And they'll tell you some of the stuff they're going through, that had gone through and have experienced, and it's amazing.
And then if you can bring a +1, right, specifically a spouse or a significant other, because then they can kind of be on board with everything that's going on there. A lot of times people will come and they're like really excited about it, but their family members don't know about it, or the people that they're trying to help, right? So bring those people with you.
And so there's 2 different days. It's the 3rd and the 8th of December that we're doing those so that we give people an opportunity. We'll do one probably close to this area and then one a little bit up north. Our first conference we spoke at was in Ogden, and so there's just a lot of activity for us up there because everybody's telling everyone and everyone's. So she moved to Ogden actually because there was so much going on up there, and so we're kind of seeding it in both areas. So there'll be 2 dates and 2 locations that you'll have to choose from. The locations aren't on there yet, but we'll get that out to you because it'll collect your basic information for us to get back with you. Because that's what it's all about. I'm not a business person. This is weird to me to have a business out of it. It's taken me forever to make it a business. I worked off referrals that whole time I was in the office. Never did any. For the first 4 years I did this, I did nothing to promote. It was just people telling everybody else. But I want it to explode. How much of the world needs this?
Everyone.
The whole thing. Everybody, every nook and cranny. Once people have been through it, they're like, whoa. How are we functioning without this? Like,
Not very well.
this is not very well, obviously. We're not doing well. I mean, look at that trajectory of Alzheimer's, the same thing with suicide rates, same thing with all the mental illnesses. Like, we're not going a good place that way. So you guys that now have this information, we are the ones that are going to help people and get it out more and serve more. So it's so exciting to meet you guys and to see each of your faces. Can't wait to connect more with you